I'm going to tell you about our adventures implementing an AI teaching assistant for motion picture engineering. So what's motion picture engineering? Well, it's a 12-week master's level course in the Department of Electronic and Electrical Engineering, taught by Professor Cochran, who's here today. It takes approximately 45 students every year, and it trains them for a career in engineering for cinema post-production, VFX, video streaming, broadcasting. It features video processing algorithms, there's math, coding. There's a lot of industry relevant guest speakers, which is quite cool, from the likes of the Foundry, YouTube, Sky, Videolan, and local post-production houses as well. And what we wanted to do was see if we could make an AI teaching assistant that's designed specially for the students in motion picture engineering. Would they like it? Would they engage with it? And also, would they see it as being able to replace a real teaching assistant? Would they use it over ChatGPT, etc.? So that was our kind of experiment. So how is such a thing usually implemented? We had to find out first. A lot of educators worldwide have tried this already, from Dublin City University to Harvard. And they often use this technique called retrieval augmented generation, which is a way that you can take an AI large language model and turn it into a subject matter expert by leveraging a private knowledge base, for example, of course materials, but without having to retrain the LLM. So it's a really interesting technique that kind of combines search technology and generative AI, and it's kind of like a fancy prompt engineering, and it was very interesting. So we decided we wanted to do this, and while a lot of off-the-shelf solutions exist for this, those ones didn't have the features that we desired for our experiment. We wanted to ensure that we had anonymity for the students who would use the teaching assistant. So we couldn't tell who was using it, who wasn't, who was asking what question. We wanted to be able to look at the questions that the students were putting into the teaching assistant, but at the same time protect the data. So if they typed anything that they shouldn't, that data wouldn't go anywhere and we could protect it and all that. Azure AI Foundry, Microsoft Azure is what we decided to use to build. It's a platform that you can build applications on. It has this AI Foundry thing in it, which has a bunch of machine learning tools that you can use. And that was desirable because it's as Azure, as colleges, as the university's chosen enterprise platform of choice, came sort of pre-approved for compliance for use by students and staff. And as well, if we had a bit of flexibility, if we built ourselves, we could customize our application. So you can see we had to build a front end for that ourselves. And that's just like a snapshot of it. It's like a chatbot similar to ChatGPT. It needed to be good with displaying math, code. We wanted to make sure that it gave references to where the material was coming from. You can see the sources there, so that students could go back to the original lectures and kind of look up more and check that the thing wasn't hallucinating, which we know that LLMs can do sometimes. So that is how we approached it. So how did the students receive it? Because we had built the thing ourselves, we could look into the database and see sort of, this is like chat sessions per day over the 7 weeks that we deployed the teaching assistant. So students were kind of like slow on the uptake. We launched it during reading week when they get time off from teaching to sort of revise and stuff. We were kind of surprised that they didn't check it out, but we reminded them about it in class later. And then they sort of embraced it for a take-home assignment that they had to do, which was a report writing assignment. And they asked it for a lot of help structuring their reports, which was kind of interesting to see. And then really interesting, we decided to let them use it in an open book exam. And that's what the real engagement peak is there. So maybe it's not so surprising, I don't know. And this is sessions. There were 43 students in the cohort this year. And if you look at that time period of the exam, you can see 42 sessions there. So it's likely that a lot of them tried it out. A couple other engagement peaks. And then another open book exam where they weren't allowed to use a teaching assistant, but leading up to it, they definitely sort of asked it to summarize material, help them study, and cheekily asked it for answers and questions to the exam, which was quite funny to see. They really tried with that, but the teaching assistant said, I don't know, but you might consider studying X, Y, and Z. So that was interesting. And then they had another take-home assignment that they used it for to ask questions of as well. So total chat sessions during the time, 296, lots of messages went back and forth. Average messages per chat session, 12.7. So that was good engagement for our proof of concept. At the end of every year of motion picture engineering, there is a course exit survey where students can kind of give their perceptions of the course. And 6 of the questions this year we dedicated to perceptions of the teaching assistant. So you can see here, 5 of those were kind of on a Likert scale. And 1 was an open-ended thing where we said, tell us what you think of it. Did it help you with anything? What do you think? Do you think it should be allowed in an open book exam? So overall, you can see here that the feelings seem to be positive. You know, they found it beneficial, supporting their learning. The answers were okay some of the time, most of the time. Amazingly, they were really jazzed about it for an open book exam, being allowed to use it. Question 4, it should actually say prefer over a real tutor, not human. I think that changes the question a bit, typo. So you can see they had mixed feelings about that here, which suggests that they see it more as a supplementary tool and not a replacement for a real teaching assistant. So that was interesting. And that kind of aligns with data that other educators have found with their AI teaching assistants. Would they use a future as part of other courses? Yes, maybe. But the real insights came from the open-ended question 6, where they told us what they were using it for and how it helped them sort of understand some concepts that didn't quite click in lectures. But the most interesting thing was, even though students overwhelmingly used it in their open book exam, and they seem to have really agreed with being able to use it, here they revealed kind of more nuanced opinions around that, where half of the students who had opinions about whether it should be used in an open book exam were saying maybe it shouldn't. And they sort of thought that maybe it de-incentivized deeper learning, actually studying for the exam in advance if you could rely on the teaching assistant, maybe like advantaged students who weren't as conscientious and didn't want to study for the exam. And they suggested kind of remedies here. For example, you could penalize students' marks for every time they queried it, or, you know, if you didn't use it at all, you get special marks, this kind of thing. So that was really interesting to see that kind of like push and pull around having it for an exam versus whether you agree with that idea. So yeah, this was a proof of concept, and it was interesting, and there were more lessons learned from it. When we were sort of testing our teaching assistants against ChatGPT as we were tuning it, we found that ChatGPT is very hard to beat these days, especially on public knowledge, because even with video processing concepts and things that you think are really complicated, it kind of knows a lot of stuff. So sometimes our teaching assistant wasn't doing as well. But where the retrieval augmented generation really wins out is when the information is private and ChatGPT won't know it. So that can be good for things like, you know, course logistics, like when is my next exam, or what room do I have to go to for this, or something recent. We had a scenario where there was a command line change in FFmpeg students had to use for this tool for video compression lab, and we were able to train our teaching assistant to know this very recent information, whereas ChatGPT would have given the wrong answer. The other reflection is, so we custom built this thing, and there are off-the-shelf solutions, as I said. Is it worth all that effort? Because there was a lot of development effort and like a lot of use case-based tuning to get it to behave the way we wanted. So that's a consideration for next year. Also, was it a bit too conscientious? We went to all this trouble to ensure the student anonymity, and then in class we couldn't discuss with them casually about how they were using the teaching assistant, what they were doing with it, and it would have been nice to do that. So maybe we rethink that next time we do this. And then the cost. So with Azure, you can sort of predict the cost in advance. It came out as we predicted. It was about like 39 cents per student per day, which with 43 students is about just over €17 per day. And that's for an always on teaching assistant. And sometimes we scaled it up and down. We probably didn't need to do that, but we did that for the open book exam and so on. And we definitely overspec'd it because we were just learning about deploying all these things in Azure. So next year we'll remember that. But Azure being an enterprise system, it really is best, it's most cost effective at scale. So in Harvard, they did this for their computer science cohort, which has thousands of students, and they got way more sort of cost effectiveness out of that. So maybe if more people are using a teaching assistant, more courses are supported by it, it can be more cost effective. And then future work, we just started to kind of look into the data, the queries that students are asking, and thought, could that always show you if there are difficult to grasp topics that students are having every year, and give you some insight there? Maybe that could drive sort of like a generation of some supplementary learning materials using AI as well, perhaps like explainer diagrams or like explainer videos, or kind of like, it was really interesting to sort of start to think about some of the stuff you could do with that data. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and yeah, that's it.